What's going on, y'all? It's Amigo Aaron back. I can't get enough today. I'm back for my second stream. We're going to be playing something non-Amiga related this time out. This is WWE Arcade Wrestling time. We're going to give some of my favorite wrestling games a shot. I'll be playing these on the venerable Xbox, the original, the old school, the original G, with this wireless Logitech controller. I just watched 5 hours of WWF / WWE, the largest, the greatest Royal Rumble of all time, and since I thought, well, it wasn't enough for me, I thought I'd get some of this in here. So I'm going to be picking my favorite team. I thought we'd go through some of these the WWF games here, the classic stuff that they never really recaptured, in my opinion. I like this game a lot. This game successfully made me pretty much screw up my college career because I played it so much in Louisville going to class when it came out. And this one's sort of unheralded. You don't hear much about it anymore. Oh, son of a gun. What you've got here, my perennial favorite team of bad guy heels, Macho Man Randy Savage and the Honky Tonk Man, which are my two favorite guys easily. That's one of the reasons right there, that vicious clothesline, one of my favorite moves. But this game, of course, the predecessor to WrestleFest, which is the more highly touted game, and it really is a better game, but this game has a lot going for it as well, with the ability to have your cool tag team, the fact that you've got guys that aren't available in the other one, which I always like. Oh no! This game is sort of got a little bit of Matt Mania in it, which heck, we might play a little Matt Mania too. So I like a game that gives you a little more freedom. You know, there have been plenty. Hey, Trey Guard, there's been plenty of wrestling games made throughout the years. I mean, clearly, but these WWF games of the time, you know, in terms of just straight up playability, are probably my favorite game. Now I love Matt Mania, which I love it. I've owned it. I still own the board for it. It was, of course, a game of its age. You know, man, Hulk beat me. Give me a break, brother. Oh, no. One thing this game does have is a bunch of guys doing moves that you would never see them catch doing ever. Man, Macho just getting pummeled. I gotta get him out of there. I like, oh, man, look at this. Hulk will not be denied. Oh! Sorry, I had to laugh. But there are guys that, like, Hulk does a Harley Race style high knee, for example, that you would never see him do. I don't think I've ever seen him do a high knee in his life. If you would, like, I know Hacksaw Duggan is a drop kick, which is, I don't think that was in Hacksaw's repertoire from back in the day. But man, I'm not doing well. I haven't played this for quite a while. Actually, I used to be a pretty good hand at it, but it's been a while. I tend to make these matches last too long, and you really don't have to. The computer actually goes down pretty easy, all things considered. Let's see if I can put him away here. Let's try to get to the next level. Oh, I tried to be too cool there. No, I'm in deep trouble now. I like the fact that your partner will come and save you. I can't help myself, guys. I love that elbow. I'm in trouble. Get over here, Mach. No, no dice. An auspicious debut. You know, I will say, at least a couple of the fellows in this are still around. We'll go one more. I love that. That, of course, is the little mobile rings from WrestleMania 3, the Silverdome, the Pontiac Silverdome. If you watch the recent Andre the Giant bio documentary that they did on HBO, which I recommend, it was good. I mean, if you're a long-time wrestling fan like me, there's not a whole lot in there that you didn't know. But it was still interesting. Andre had an interesting life. Obviously, he's a huge guy. They had the Supernovas. The aisles were so long that they had these guys come out in those little motorized rings. I'm not sure we ever saw those motorized rings again. I wish you could taunt in this game because your computer opponent can. I distinctly remember, and it's etched in my mind, poor Andre, beat down as he was, his body was failing him, and here he comes out, he comes to the ring in that little ring, and what I remember mostly is him going back to the locker room after the match with Bobby Heenan there, and he's just getting pelted with garbage. I always felt bad for the guy, you know, I mean, you really shouldn't throw stuff in the ring, but I mean, anyhow, but still, I mean, this was a guy that I think anyone that knew anything about Andre knew he was in really rough shape at that point. So you're basically pelting a guy that won't be around much longer with garbage. I always felt kind of bad about that. Not to bring us down, but Macho on that show had the show stealer, when he wrestled Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in sort of a legendary bout now. It's widely regarded as one of the best WrestleMania bouts that there ever was. So I don't know if I can hit it from there. I remember that card distinctly. I was on a band trip, and one of the adult guardians came on the bus and read the results of the show like it was a joke. And me and my buddy were huge wrestling fans, so we were so happy to know what had happened, because back in those days, heck, there was no way to find out what went on in these shows until the promotion decided to reveal what had happened, and it could take months for the tapings and stuff to reach the point where they're ready to tell you what happened. And sometimes they wouldn't tell you because they were trying to sell you pay-per-views after the fact, or try to get you to buy the DVD. So until you got to one of the after wrestling magazines, you pretty much didn't know what was happening. Not my best showing here, but I'm going to try to at least get to the next level. One aspect of this game that I really like is that the bad guys in this are Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant, and which they were, if you'll recall, the aftermath of that particular show, WrestleMania 3, where Hulk actually lost the belt to Andre because of the twin refs in one of the goofiest angles of all time. But I always thought that was great. There were two Dave Hebners, and so this. But for a brief time, Andre was aligned with Ted, and of course you got Virgil here. Virgil I've seen many times on the indie scene. He gets around quite a bit. You have to sort of lure these guys out sometimes. Here he comes. Come get your beating. Poor Boss Man, of course, passed away. Big Bubba Rogers. I'm the #1 Midnight Express fan of all time, and so I was happy to see Big Bubba get a chance. And he had some of Hulk Hogan's best matches were against the Boss Man, and I will say, Boss Man was in one of the all-time great tasteless angles. And I don't know how people remember this, but there was an angle where the Big Show's father had passed away for real. And I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but they ran an angle where Bossman just basically made fun of the Big Show's dead father, and one of the all-time funny moments. I mean, it's not funny, but it is, where there's a scene where the Big Bossman's driving the I don't know why he had the Blues Brothers car, but he did, and he was driving it around, and he went to the funeral of Big Show's dad and chained the coffin to the car and drove off with it, and the Big Show actually got on top of the coffin and rode around. It was so stupid, but it's so funny. I'll never forget that. I mean, that is the wacky world of wrestling. I don't know how good an idea it was to do an angle where they made fun of a guy's dad, but still, it was funny, man. And I'll never forget that one. But, of course, Hacksaw Duggan beat cancer. So to his credit, I think he still works some indie dates now and again. I mean, he's been around forever. He started out in the, I believe, first he worked for in the Mid-South region for Bill Watts. I think that's where he came from originally. And if it wasn't where he started, it's certainly where he gained prominence as a big killer. In one of his early matches that was really well regarded was a big draw, was wrestling Ted DiBiase, ironically, in a tuxedo match, if you can imagine that. Yeah, 1984 to 91. We've just who do we have here? End of the line. Joel says that was the peak of wrestling. You know, I don't know who you're into, Joel, but I was not a big fan of the WWF in that era. I was a WCW NWA fan, World Championship Wrestling, the Horsemen, Ric Flair, all that, and so ow, not me, idiot. But I have to agree with you from that aspect. I just think that was a different time. Now the WWF did have some outstanding workers, including Macho and Randy Savage, or excuse me, Macho and Ricky Steamboat. But they got into that really cartoonish, wacky, and it got even worse. I mean, you got some real goofy stuff. I remember how much I hated Doink. It's funny because Doink has grown on me over the years. But Matt Bourne was a great wrestler, and I'd seen him many times. I'd seen him many times in WCW and in Texas. And he had an awesome team with a guy named Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. So I was familiar with Matt Bourne. I pretty much knew pretty early on that Doink was Matt Bourne because of the way he worked, But I just couldn't. I hated the fact that they were taking a guy that was a really good worker and giving him such a stupid gimmick. But it was what it was. And again, wrestling, it's so stupid. You have to sort of laugh at it, Now Bockwinkel, Joel mentions, was an AWA guy. I used to watch the AWA on ESPN. Yeah, that's me, man. I will say, of all the AWA guys, Bockwinkel was really amongst the best. His team with Ray Stevens was just tremendous, and they had, of course, Bockwinkel's longtime manager was Bobby the Brain Heenan, and they were, what a pairing. And unlike a lot of the guys Bobby worked with, his two wrestlers in that team could both talk. I mean, Bockwinkel, he had this. He said he was billed from Beverly Hills, and he had this way of speaking that was just so snooty. He was a well-educated guy, but I mean, he's one of those guys that he tried to make you feel stupid. Perfect wrestling heel. And one of the things I liked about Bockwinkel is he had some of the all-time great wrestling hair. I mean, he would get pummeled, and you could see his hair like flutter around, and it was of course it was blonde. So that made it really stand out. And that's one of the reasons those guys always used to peroxide their hair, was so the object of that was so the people, the cheap seats, could see you, real well, see what was going on, because there was no Titantrons and crap back in those days. The Midnight Rockers, who Joel was mentioned here on the chat, which were Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Of course, Shawn Michaels, one of the greats, and Marty Jannetty, very underrated worker. I first saw these guys get together in the AWA, and I will say, at the time, I thought, look at these guys. These are some cheap Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express ripoffs. I mean, come on, the Midnight Rockers. That name is horrible. And the WWF just finally changed it to the Rockers. Good move, because the Midnight Rockers was just ridiculous. I will say that I thought they were a great team. I mean, that all that aside, once I actually saw them work, they had some awesome bouts back in the day with the Bad Company, which was Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka, which I always thought they were a good team. Pat Tanaka, a very underrated worker. I like the Midnight Rockers. They wrestled. They wrestled when they brought in Paulie Dangerously, brought in the original Midnight Express of Dennis Condrey and Randy Rhodes. I'm a big, not so much Randy Rhodes, but I love Dennis Condrey. His version of the Midnight Express is my favorite one. And I like their matches. I thought they were really good matches. And, of course, they also got to work with Lawler and Dundee a couple times there, which, they'd worked in Mid-South before, so that was fun. But, yeah, the Rockers were a good team. They really never did much in the WWF. I mean, they're sort of known for, Shawn Michaels kicking Marty through that window. But You know, I feel bad for Marty, but Marty also was his own worst enemy. You know, he didn't do himself any favors. You know, it's funny, the WWF's tag division, and we'll get into this more when we play the next game. They had teams that I couldn't stand that I ended up liking. I softened up on the WWF after a while. But they were so goofy, and they had a lot of rip-offs and stupid angles. But I mean, it was sort of fun. I mean, wrestling, I look at it now, and it's just so goofy. It's just a goofy, straight-up American goofy thing. You know, I mean, and other countries took it and did what they did with it. But I mean, it is such a weird thing that it's still around is amazing to me. We just went and saw independent wrestling. I think it was last weekend or 2 weekends ago. We go see it a lot, you know, whenever it's around, and it's always fun. But I mean, it's as close as you're going to get the live theater. I know that's a sort of, you hear that now and again, but it's true, man. I mean, it's just a weird, crazy thing that you go see live, and you get people to go see it that would never go see theater, you know, on their best day. Here we go. Now listen to this brilliant voice acting. I love the expressions too. And you've got Virgil there, who also was Vincent in WCW. I'm going to beat these guys, then we'll move on down the line. There's a reason that I pick Honky Tonk and Macho, and the reason is they're the best against Andre. Andre, you can't really do much with him, but what you can do is this, and that's why I like Honky. Honky also has that little kick, and you can sneak that in on Andre if you get lucky. And so, believe it or not, yes, Honky Tonk Man just slammed Andre because you sort of have to get Andre in a spot. I gotta get Honky out of there because Andre will put you in a submission hold and you'll be done quick. So that's the extent of what I'll get to use from him. Now you can actually get Macho to clothesline him, but it's not the easiest thing. Not good. Oh, I got lucky there. And then what'll happen is when Andre wants to, he'll go down and talk to Ted. It probably just take another punch or kick if I can get one in. Shoot, he's not playing. He's not going to let me do what I want. So he'll probably go try to tag out here. Oh, not good. He's going to put me up in the backbreaker. No. Okay, he's going to go tag. You'll watch it. They'll whisper. They don't tag. They just go over their plans. Ted I love because he has an awesome... Ted was famous for having one of the all-time great power slams. He would really spin you quickly with it. And he also has one of the wackiest top rope maneuvers you'll ever see, where he goes to the top rope facing the crowd, and then $1 Million Dream. I'm in deep trouble. Oh, that was it. That was it. And I just exited the game in my anger. Didn't mean to do that, but that's the way it goes. We're going to move on. Let's get some WrestleFest in. Yeah, I know. Joel points out that Ted DiBiase is a color swap of Doug, and it's true. Yeah, quotes. I know. You're right. One thing about these Xbox controllers is that when you exit this particular emulation front end, you use start and select, and it just happened to be right there. What I was trying to do is actually put in more credits to cheat, so it did prevent my cheatery. I will say that. Now this game, where do I start on this one? The all-time classic. I owned this game, the 4-player version, and just love it. Now my team on here is the $1 Million Man. And of course, when I play my team, it's the $1 Million Man and Earthquake, which I love. I'm a big fan of Earthquake. Now, here's the problem with picking the $1 Million Man in this. He doesn't actually do a body slam, and so when you play him in this, you really up the difficulty of how you, because really what you're going to have to do is actually pin these guys. So it makes it a lot tougher. But this is one of the all-time great multiplayer games. I mean, it really is. I used to get 4 players on this thing and just have a blast. And you can keep coming in too. It's, you know, you could have a house rule where you don't do that, but especially little kids who stink at it, they can just come back if they get eliminated. But man, I would have some epic battles. in this, and there's a pattern to it if you've played it long enough to get a feel for how it goes. Now you've got me as Ted DiBiase. I'm beating the crap out of Crush. Crush was the replacement for Smash in Demolition. Demolition's a funny team because they were basically put together to be Road Warrior ripoffs, and they were. But the funny thing about it is, you take two really world-traveled veterans and put them in the role of Demolition, which you had Bill Eadie, who was Axe, and he was also the Masked Superstar, which is where I first saw him. He used to be a rival of Ted DiBiase, or excuse me, of Mr. Wrestling 2. And I was a big Wrestling 2 fan back in the day. Anyone that listens to the show knows how much I like Wrestling 2. He was my favorite when I was a kid, Mr. Wrestling 2 and Tommy Wildfire Rich. And then you also had Smash, who was played by Crusher Khrushchev / the Blacktop Bully, a guy who had been in many roles in his career. I mostly knew him as I'm going to cheat so I can keep playing. I mostly knew him as Crusher Khrushchev. He was one of the Russians, along with Ivan and Nikita Koloff. He was the American, Russian commie sympathizer. You hated him. But he was actually a pretty good worker, and he was a very powerful, well-built guy. So when you got those two guys in Demolition, they actually made that work. They stuck him with a horrible manager, a repo man. I forgot about that. I mean, they had him with Mr. Fuji. I was never a huge fan of the Fuji. He was sort of a generic, kind of a throwback. At this point, I don't know when Fuji started, but I mean, at one time, Fuji was a tag team guy, and he was there because of the, everybody in America, we hated the Japanese because of World War II, the Pearl Harbor, stuff. But I mean, you're talking in the 80s, you didn't hear much. There wasn't a whole lot of hate for the Japanese, but we were cool with the Japanese at that point. So his character sort of outlived its usefulness in a lot of ways. But they stuck Demolition with him, and basically he just had to sit there and look mean, and he did do that pretty well. And so Demolition ended up being a pretty good team, and got over. And who'd have thunk it? I would never have thought they would have see you later, folks, would have gotten popular. But and ended up, of course, eventually McMahon ended up getting the Road Warriors to come to WWF, and you would think they would have a huge feud. You're right, Joel. We think alike, because I was getting ready to get to that. Eventually, as Bill Eadie got older, or Axe, they added a third guy to the lineup, which is funny because they did the same thing to the Road Warriors, and it killed them. They added Crush, which was a wrestler out of Hawaii, and he was not a good worker. He never was. He stuck around for a while, and he was he was in Chronic, and he was in some other stuff, and I just never liked him as a worker. He ended up, I think he passed away, and he was into some, as I recall, he was into some gun running or something, some weird thing. Also had one of the worst pile drivers of all time, but I guess they decided that they needed to phase out Bill Eadie because of his age and whatnot, and it just ended Demolition, I mean, permanently. They never came back. They tried to do the same thing with the Road Warriors when they added Puke into Road Warrior Puke, and Puke was no good. And of course, unfortunately, he ended up being paralyzed in a match with D'Lo Brown, which was a real tragedy. Darren Droz, and that was sad. I mean, and he had potential. He was young in the sport. Oh, that's not good for me. The old backdrop booth. The truth of the matter is, wrestling's a dangerous sport. I met D'Lo Brown. He's a real nice guy. I always felt bad that he was the guy that was involved in poor Draws getting crippled up. But these things happen. I remember it was a running power bomb, and D'Lo done it a million times, but I think they just over-rotated a little bit, and that was the end of that. Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Right here, you've got Mike McGurk, the chick ring announcer that they had for a while, which I always thought she was god awful, but it was the WWF's first foray into women ring announcers, which are much more prevalent now. I'll take their original ring announcers any day of the week. You know, but that's just me. I like Howard Finkel. The Fink was my guy for the WWF. But it's funny, the NWA didn't really have what I would call a lead ring announcer that you could get behind. We had Gary Michael Capetta was there for a while. But I mean, no one really. They weren't characters like the WWF guys had. I don't know why that was. I never really thought about it until right now. But the Fink, and the Fink can still go whenever they bring him out. He's always still good to go. I'm gonna make short work of the Hulk here. This is my team, not just because I resemble Earthquake in a stunning way, but because Earthquake's a bad dude. He's got that awesome finisher. Ted's got everything else you need to finish to close the deal. Whoa! It is a Hulk Hogan match. He kicked out of my move. What a punk. He won't kick out of this. That's it. Joel asked the best commentating team. I'll have to say, I like Gorilla and Jesse the best of those, if you want the truth. It's funny, I didn't like Gorilla as a kid, but as I got older, I like his laid-back, like, commentating style. It's strange. But, really, my favorite commentator was, I mean, of all time, was Gordon Soley, who was the old school. Yeah, see what I mean? And I love Gordon Soley. Of course, I like Jim Ross and the King are okay. I did like Jesse though, and Gorilla. Like I said, Gorilla and Bobby were good. And I actually like, and this is, you'll never hear anybody say this, I thought Gorilla and Lord Alfred Hayes were a pretty amusing team. Lord Alfred Hayes amused me because he's such a, weird guy. But I always thought he was kind of funny. And when you put Cornette was a pretty good commentator as well. Bruno, well, Bruno though, they tried to shoehorn Bruno in. God bless him. And I don't know when this is going to be listened to by anybody else, but Bruno just passed away about a week, a few days ago, about a week. And so we're still in the mourning process with Bruno. But Bruno, yeah, he was not the best commentator. And him and McMahon were god awful. I never liked Vince as a commentator. I know some people have warmed to him, but I have not. I thought he was a real crappy commentator. But everyone's got their. I will say any of them were better than what we've got now. The commentation now is dreadful, and they can't convey a daggum thing. They've lost the ability to understand what makes money because, in my opinion, they don't have to make money the way they used to, drawing houses and whatnot. And so it's. I don't like what they've got going now. Oh no! Oh, son of a gun! That's it. You're going up. You got to be careful with Crush. Well, I didn't even buy in. I don't know why. You got to be careful with Crush because he's got some nasty moves that do a lot of damage. That spinning backbreaker is nasty. Yeah, Vince had his moments, but I didn't like him as a commentator personally. So now you've got an interesting pair here, and boy, talk about wacky. If you'd asked me when this game was released, which one of these guys would be gone, I wouldn't have said Mr. Perfect because Mr. Perfect was in great shape. Curt Hennig was a hell of a worker. Another guy I saw starting in the AWA, I saw some of his early matches, and you could tell. I mean, he was green, but you knew he was going to be a heck of a worker. Of course, Larry the Axe was a real good worker back in the day. And so the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Actually, he really surpassed his dad by a long ways. The fact that his son has been so moronically nurtured in the business is a testament to the stupidity of the WWF because Curtis Axel is actually a good worker, and they let him die on the vine. He's just basically a job guy, and he should be doing well. Earthquake I always liked Earthquake as a worker. He passed away years ago. A lot of people don't know that Earthquake was a fairly accomplished sumo back in the day. He has a great story. I think I may have mentioned on the show where in Japan, you don't just walk away from sumo, man. That's not the way it works. And you're effectively, when you're a low-level sumo, you're sort of subservient to your club. And Earthquake had enough of sumo in Japan and wanted to get the hell out of there. So he had a car waiting for him. And after a sumo match, he went out the door in his gear, got on a plane, and went back to America. He had to escape effectively to get out of there. I always thought that was crazy. But yeah, he passed away a few years ago. And then, of course, Jake, who lived like hell on wheels for decades. His antics were legendary. Still around. And I guess you can thank Diamond Dallas Page and his yoga program for keeping Jake around. Jake is I will say one thing, Jake's a tough guy. I was a huge Jake the Snake fan back in the day. I mean, I loved his promo work. I mean, most people that know anything about wrestling would say the same thing. Jake was a great worker. He had a real unique style in the ring that he would work, which I enjoyed. He literally lived up to his name. He was a long, sort of wiry guy, and he worked with the tools that he had. I thought Jake was a tremendous worker, but he had the demons, the old demons. Joe asked about Magnum TA. I'll tell you something. I was one of those kids that rooted for the bad guys, but I loved Magnum. Magnum had this aura of like stud, like a tough guy you didn't want to screw with. I mean, and Dusty nurtured that real well, bringing him up. And I didn't see any of Magnum's stuff before he came to the NWA. Although I've seen it recently, but at the time I hadn't seen it, so I didn't realize. I never saw him as a young green worker. And man, I thought Magnum was awesome. I saw Magnum wrestle Ric Flair at the Fieldhouse in Huntington, West Virginia, to a 45-minute draw, and it was great. I remember distinctly, it was the most well-attended probably match I ever went to in West Virginia. The Fieldhouse was completely sold out. Man, he's selling everything. The Fieldhouse was completely sold out, and they had a line that went around the block to get in, and so they turned away. They probably turned away half again what the Fieldhouse would hold. I mean, people had to see what was going on there, and it was a hell of a match. I think it's one. I mean, I've seen Magnum wrestle a bunch of times live, but that's the one I remember the most. That's probably the most memorable match I ever saw. I saw Dusty, as you mentioned him, in my first. I love this. I love this interview here with the Road Warriors. I don't know who they got to do these voices, but they got the dialogue right. And then Gene's wearing his magic tux kimono there. But I saw Dusty in my very first live show. He wrestled Ivan Koloff in the main event of that show, and it was great. I thought it was great. Buzz Sawyer was on that show. And it was that was a lot of fun being a kid and I had my dad take me. I just had to go. My buddy was really into wrestling. He got me into it, and it was great. It was good to, it was great. It was a great time to be a fan. But I was talking to Boat just yesterday about this, but wrestling is still great. But it's different. It's not. I mean, you can't go back again. And can guys cut promos? No, they can't cut promos. All the scripted nonsense. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to hate. But in terms of the athleticism of the wrestlers and what they can do in the ring, they do things that just are. I mean, that's unbelievable. And especially some of the guys working in the indie scene are just unbelievable workers. I mean, I've seen wrestling for years. I mean, there were a ton of poor workers out there, and now wrestling's gotten to a certain point where if you're not a good worker, you're pretty much going to have to go. That you really, I mean, for the most part, there's not a lot of boogie woogie mans or some of these, or like your, McGraws or these guys that just were like goofy. They had a gimmick, but they weren't really good workers. Oh, this ain't good. Oh, no. No, Doomsday Device. Man, they're not messing around. I gotta get him out of here. Oh, let me go. Get out of here. Well, that actually didn't do me any favors. They will beat you up on the outside, and hopefully Ted will have some energy by the time he gets back in the ring. Oh, that ain't good. No, he's gonna give me another one. Oh, jeez, man. Well, time to cheat to win. I hate to do it. I have beaten this game many times without putting in extra quarters, but this is not one of those times. You got to cheat a lot. But I think wrestling's okay. It is not bad. I mean, it's just different. It's a different thing. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Do I watch as much as I used to? No. I mean, there's no way. I still find it as appealing, but I do find things in it that I enjoy. And so I watch it when I can. Like I said, when you go to see the wrestling live, I don't know where you're at, Joel, but around here we are fortunate to have several independent companies that run, and they're old school companies. They don't really run like you're not going to see the young bucks coming into town. These are guys that bring in like, I met Beautiful Bobby a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago. I've met Boogeyman, Jimmy Valiant, and they bring in all the old school guys. And so it's still fun. That sort of reminds me of being a younger man. Anchorage. So you guys probably don't get much. You guys probably don't get a lot of wrestling up there, I'm guessing. I know they used to do those tours up that way, but I don't know if they still do or not. Wow, Anchorage, eh? That's crazy. Yeah, I had a feeling. Hey, there you go, man. Start you up a promotion. There's probably a lot of people looking to do something up that way. We have a sort of an old school promotion nearby that runs a lot of. They have all the legends. I met Jimmy Hart. Oh, I met Stan the Lariat Hansen. That was outstanding. I never thought I'd get to meet him. That was really cool. And he gave a speech during his stay at the promotion. It was really entertaining. So that was fun. So I've been very fortunate. Buff Bagwell. I got a picture. I'm looking at a picture right now of me with my son meeting Buff Bagwell. I was never a huge Buff fan, but it was still cool. Man, Road Warrior Hawk doesn't want to go. Oh no! I'm just gonna keep missing elbows and fist drops. I need to tag in the big guy. Finish him off. Oh, I didn't get to him in time. Not good. This has been an epic cheating battle. Let's see if he can submit. Come on, ref. Yes. Shan, yeah, yes he is. It's funny when you go back and watch his matches, you can tell that he can't see because, I mean, he lays those lariats in like nobody's business. I would not want to wrestle him. I just watched his bout with Vader a couple weeks ago where he jacked up Vader's eye. Man, that was two dinosaurs going at it. All right, so we're gonna pop out of this and we're gonna go ahead and run some of the last WWF game that I've got on here, the one that everyone hates, but I'm going to give it a shot. I always thought it was a fun game. Now, Joel comments that modern women's wrestling is the area that's way better. I'm gonna give you a yes with a but, and I'm gonna talk to you about the women's wrestling of the 80s in Japan. Your All Japan Women's, those ladies were the best, some of the best wrestlers of all time, period, men or women. And there were a lot of those girls that were outstanding. Jumping Bomb Angels, Crush Gals, Bull Nakano and Dump, Toyota. There were a lot of Kudo. There was a lot of the great women's workers back in the day, and the WWF actually brought some of those girls in. One of my all-time favorite girls matches in the WWF, and it was on the very first Royal Rumble show, and it was the Jumping Bomb Angels against the Glamour Girls, which I think was Leilani Kai and Judy Martin, and they were these two old grizzled brides, but man, they could go, and they really had a hell of a match with the Jumping Bombs. I was always real impressed with that one. Oh, yeah, they should have been embarrassed, too, because those chicks could go. Now, this game, I'm telling you, when this came out, I thought it was just crap. I couldn't stand it. I was like, man, what is this garbage? But I have to say, I ended up picking up the board for it. I got it for a song, too, and had it in my arcade machine for a while. And it's such a stupid game that it's sort of amusing and fun. That's what I mean, they went for the whole Mortal Kombat. Of course, it's Midway, so they had to break out the motion cap and all that jive. Do it, but it's so over the top and idiotic that it's grown on me over the years. I see. Joel hates it. And, I mean, it is stupid. But, I mean, it's, I don't know, part of it is just funny. Now, Yokozuna, and one thing I like about these games is that you get to see all the old wrestlers that are no longer with us. Here's another guy who was, for his size, was a big old boy. I mean, he got up to, like, I think they said at his height, he was like an 800-pounder. I can remember how this guy does combos. Oh, no. Oh! Get off me. I just need to hit him one more time. A son of a gun. But he got up to be a huge man, but he was a pretty good worker on this thing. You know, for a big guy. I mean, I don't think he's a little overrated. He ain't no Vader. In my opinion, he's not in that ballpark. But he could go before he got ridiculously huge. But he had a cool gimmick. You know, the big Samoan guy. You know, the big Japanese worker, the big Japanese sumo. It hadn't been done all that much. Of course, now you've got legitimate. Oh, look at this. Into this guy. You've got legitimate sumo wrestlers that became workers, like your Akibono. I mean, I guess you could call him a worker. He was never that good. But I like the fact that they had the song digitized in the background. Here's Lex Luger and his weird. In fact, this is the big matchup that began and ended Lex's career in the WWF. Now, if you recall, you can see this. It's not the Xbox struggles with this one a little bit. Lex was the narcissist, if you'll recall, when they brought him in from the NWA, and he was also competing in that god-awful bodybuilding WWF junk. And then Vince just, I mean, I remember when it happened, out of the blue, holy smokes, out of the blue, Vince turns him good guy and has him slam Yokozuna on the aircraft carrier, and lo and behold, he's suddenly a good guy. All-American Lex Luger, Lex Express, going across the road. Yeah, Lex looks rough now, and, you know, don't do drugs, kids. You know, I tell you, man, they ruined he ruined his life. I mean, they ruined his relationship with Elizabeth. You know, he was actually charged in her death. You know, initially just due to the fact that she died from drug issues, and he was living with her, and she had a bunch of drugs. Man, he's beating her like a dog. I'm going to switch characters. Yeah, but Lex ended up becoming quite pivotal in the rise of WCW Nitro when he made the jump over secretly to WCW and was on that very first Nitro show when he came out at the Mall of America, and everybody was surprised to see him. You know, it was sort of a big deal. But of course they ended up booking him incorrectly there as well. Lex was to say Lex didn't fulfill his potential, which is, you know, it's sort of sad because Lex had a lot of potential, and he did okay. He was a world champion, but he never really got to the point where he should have been. The Shockmaster. I don't know if you saw this. Like I said, I just watched the Greatest Royal Rumble yesterday, which was from Saudi Arabia. That's a whole other issue there about how you feel about how that went down. But they had a Shockmaster moment on there that will live in infamy for all the time. Titus O'Neil, the big deal, from Florida State, ran down the aisle yesterday, and in a hilarious moment, as he was running down the aisle to get into the ring, he tripped on his way down the aisle, and he fell under the ring. It was the funniest thing you've ever seen. He's 6'8". And his entire frame was under the ring. It was so funny, man. It's the funniest thing I've seen for quite a while. And that was literally the highlight of the show. This was a nothing happening, weird feeling show. Oh, not good. It felt sort of. It didn't feel like a typical WWF show, WWE show, because number one, it was on in a weird time. They don't usually run early, but they had to due to where they were at. It was in Saudi Arabia, and they were really putting over the Saudis because the Saudis drove a dump truck full of money up to their house to get that match over. There were no women performers on that show. Also not performing was Sami Zayn, who is of Syrian descent, and so they wouldn't allow him to be on the show. And really, that's ridiculous. The crowd was, I would say, borderline interested, honestly, and it made for a real uncomfortable viewing experience. I'm going to play one more here, and it was sad. It was a sad show. It was not a good show either, to be honest with you. The Royal Rumble, I'll tell you, 50, that's too many guys. It went on forever, and at the end of the match, the crowd was just sick of even counting. They were done. This was a crowd. A lot of these people, you could tell, had no idea what they were seeing. You know, I don't think they gave a crap. A lot of them didn't give a crap about wrestling. I know this show was basically to put over Saudi Arabia. I mean, that was what it was. This was an ad. This was an advert for the government of Saudi Arabia and their advancement into modern society. And in this modern society, women could not be there unaccompanied. They were not allowed to be there by themselves. Men that came without a woman were relegated to the upper deck. They could not be there. And of course, the entirety of the bottom section of the arena was for the Saudi family. You know, I mean, so listen, I'm not going to tell you what to think. That's up to it's up to you. But you know, it's probably time for some of that stuff to go away. I mean, we were all these countries, including America, we're making changes, and for the better, hopefully. And the fact that you can't come to a wrestling show because you're not allowed or whatever, it just seems, you know, we went through that. If you study Sputnik Monroe, when he wrestled back in the 50s and wanted to let black people fill up the empty seats that were in the lower deck, the lower part of the arena, but they weren't allowed because the black people were all relegated to the cheap seats. And he was like, "Wow, I'm losing money here," you know. And this was a long time ago in this country when we did this. I mean, it seems silly to me to keep these things going, but I mean, it's religion or tradition, or whatever toots your horn. I'm not here to condemn. I'm just saying that's what happened at this show, and to me, it felt weird. Now, I'm not the only person that commented on it. I know Meltzer mentioned something very similar about that, and it makes you feel a little dirty to watch a show like this. And the show which wasn't. It was an awkward show, you know. It was just a real strange show, but I mean, they made a ton of money. We'll find out at the stockholders meeting what they ended up turning over on this card. But you know, for a company that's going through its whole it's a women's revolution, which also that's malarkey. The only women's revolution there was is the fact that WWF didn't push women for a long time. Hey, no one was forcing them to make girls wrestle in coleslaw matches, bikini contests, or pillow fights. So they're revolving. The revolution is from their own idiotic booking for decades. But that's neither here nor there. You got a doink off here. There were tons of doinks back in the day, and you had Dink. You know, I know Steve Kern was a doink for a long time, and of course, like I said, Matt Bourne. I think Matt Bourne has passed as well, unfortunately. And Matt Bourne apparently had some issues. It's funny, he teamed with Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, and those two were. I guess they were pretty well known for being a couple real live wires. I always heard Buzz Sawyer was actually a local boy from around here, but I can't confirm that. Oh man, that's into me. Oh yeah, that's a beat down. See if I can kick out. Yes, it's not over. Oh no, no, don't do it. Oh, now it's over. Well, that's into me. Yep. It's part of that scream might be the fact that the game is stuttering badly. Well, I'm going to take it to the house, you guys. Thanks for joining me as I ran down some of these WWF games. I'll probably run down some more sometime in the future. It's fun to knock these out just for fun. So thanks for joining me, and until next time, adios.